So this video is actually being handled a little bit differently than pretty much all my other videos. Rather than just sitting and contemplating as to which video I want to make or waking up and seeing how I feel that morning, I actually asked all of you, what video do you want to see on this channel? I asked you guys both on Twitter as well as through YouTube's new community feature, and there is by far the most support for this video, the Fallout Online we almost got. I really like the way I handled that. I think it's going to be something I do more in the future, so if you guys aren't subscribed to this channel, which I know a lot of you aren't, and I really encourage you to subscribe. I only post once a day, so I won't really be spamming your sub boxes, and in the future I actually plan to do more live streams, especially tying around Bethesda's E3 conference, or you could follow me on Twitter, and again, I'm probably going to do more of these polls going forward, just on one day when I'm not really sure which video to make, so you guys can decide for me. Either way, now let's just jump into the regular video, the Fallout Online we almost got. So my real motivation, or I guess inspiration for making this video, is actually the talks about a new Fallout Online coming potentially at this E3. So now just to be clear, I do not think this is a reality. I don't think we're getting a Fallout Online announcement at this E3, but much of the speculation is actually stemming from a job posting on Zenimax's website for Bethesda Game Studios. I actually couldn't find a screenshot of the exact job listing. I'll look a little bit more, so maybe you'll see one on screen right now. But there are literally hundreds of articles online covering it, so more or less what that job listing was all about was Bethesda Game Studios hiring a game performance manager who will envision, evolve, and operate monetization strategies, and specifically something for a bleeding edge AAA freemium game. So many of the different freemium games we do have nowadays, and if you guys don't know, more or less that means it's a free game that does have microtransactions or ways to spend money in it, just not at the upfront cost. An example of this would be League of Legends, or even I think World of Warcraft has this model now. Maybe the base game is free, but some of the DLCs cost money, or again, there's loot boxes you can buy. So either way, the gist here is following this post and this job listing, a lot of people started to speculate that, you know what, maybe a Fallout Online is actually coming from Bethesda Game Studios. The hiring was specifically for the Montreal studio, and although I personally believe this is probably related to a mobile game similar to Fallout Shelter, because that already is a freemium game, although obviously not AAA, so that's the interesting part here. Either way, it's our discussion of this potential Fallout Online that we may see in the future. With all that being said, there actually was a Fallout Online in development that never actually got released. It actually, in a way, got shut down by Bethesda. So this Fallout Online was actually dubbed Project V13. That was like the internal name used for it. It was being developed by Masthead Studios and actually being published by Interplay. If you're a diehard Fallout fan, you actually may know about Interplay. They sold the rights to the Fallout franchise to Bethesda Game Studios back in 2007. But actually, as part of that deal, there was a stipulation that they can continue to work on this Fallout Online. So that probably sounds pretty jumbled, so I'll give you a quick history lesson as to what this Fallout Online went through, of course leading to its eventual cancellation or really being shut down. So again, it was being developed by Masthead Studios under Interplay. Two of the people on this were actually creators of the original Fallout, not Bethesda's Fallout 3 or Fallout 4 or New Vegas or anything like that, but the actual original top-down RPG we saw many years ago. The idea for this game actually began in 2006, where they begun work on this, pre-production, establishing a team, and of course concept art. Then in 2007, Interplay sold the rights to Fallout to Bethesda Game Studios. They of course went on to make Fallout 3, and that's how many of us actually know about this series. But either way, as part of that deal, they actually made a stipulation that Interplay was still allowed to make this Fallout Online. There were certain requirements here though. They had to have a certain amount of funding by a certain point, they had to have a certain amount of development done by a certain point, and many other things, but we'll get a bit more into this a little bit later. So the rights were sold in 2007, but Fallout Online production still did continue as they were allowed to. By 2008, the pre-production was largely over and real development of this Fallout Online did begin. And by 2009, it was in fully fledged development with many people working on this and actually getting the game to a playable state. But then later in 2009, a lawsuit was actually filed. It was filed by Bethesda Softworks against Interplay, and more specifically Masthead Studios, the people developing this. The lawsuit more or less stated that they weren't meeting the original terms of their agreement, that they had to be in full development by 2009. This of course was filed in 2009, and Bethesda was more or less saying that they aren't at full development. Interplay and Masthead were saying, yes, we actually are at full development, and in the lawsuit it's actually quoted that they had the game at a very playable state. So to make a long story short, more or less a judge actually ruled for Interplay, saying that as the lawsuit does progress, you can continue production on this, because initially when this lawsuit was filed, they got a cease and desist, so they technically had to stop production of the game when that happened. But either way, production was allowed to continue, but eventually they actually settled out of court. So even though many people say that the judge ruled in favor of Bethesda Game Studios, that's not true. It seems more like Interplay didn't want to deal with this or couldn't deal with this due to financial troubles, so they eventually settled and begun work on a different game also under the title Project V13. So that might be a little little bit confusing, but more or less what happened was the initial game was Fallout Online, otherwise known as Project V13, of course taking place in the Fallout universe. But after this lawsuit and the eventual stoppage of that game, they continued with many of the properties to create a new post-apocalyptic MMO. It probably would have been very similar to Fallout Online, but obviously since they couldn't use the Fallout rights anymore, they were just going to make a new game. I'm not going to talk too much about that, but it eventually died and we obviously don't have it. So the big conspiracy surrounding this is the lawsuit was actually filed, or many people believe this, because Elder Scrolls Online began development around this time. Again, the lawsuit was filed in 2009, Elder Scrolls Online came out in 2013. There's nothing confirming this, but it definitely makes a lot of sense logically that Zenimax, the parent company of Bethesda Game Studios, would have this shut down. More or less what happened, or the timeline here, is Zenimax Online Studios, the developers behind the Elder Scrolls Online, was opened in 2007. 2 years later, they filed suit against Fallout Online, which would be obvious competition considering the two franchises are so closely connected. Either way, that's largely the history behind this. That is by far the most public part about this game. Unlike other games like the Fallout 3 we almost got from Black Isle, there's not actually a ton known about what the game itself would have been. We have a lot of concept art, we actually have a short trailer and things like that, but there simply isn't as extensive details as there was previously. Either way, right off the bat, we do know this was seemingly going to be a first or third person RPG typed MMO. So a game with quest where you actually are in the third person, similar to how you are in Fallout 4, 3, New Vegas. This of course is distinctive because in the original Fallouts you actually weren't. It was a top-down game. Obviously in Fallout 3, the same method was implemented, but it's just interesting that for their Fallout Online, with production beginning in 2006, it was being designed in this manner. From some of the concept art, we can infer some of the different factions that would be available. You actually could see a player character wearing a Vault 13 vault suit, so invariably there would have been vaults among the world, which would have been really cool to explore. In addition, you could see screenshots of raiders, super mutants, and even some of those crazy and abstract creatures that we're so used to seeing in the Fallout universe. And also through much of the concept art, you can actually see the diverse wasteland that would be there. You do have built up cities to just barren waste that you can explore seemingly endlessly. We actually can also infer some other features that would have been available in this based on the follow-up Project V13 that we do know some information about. Invariably, a lot of the features that would have been present in Fallout Online / Project V13 would have been present in Project V13 2 after the lawsuit and shutdown of Fallout Online. Some things like being able to choose your race, specifically describe it as you could be a human, a cyborg, or maybe even a new breed of mutant. And even beyond that, something else really interesting, that you'd have the ability to set your character's background and thus build your own colony. And describes how you could build this up in a deserted city, or maybe even a broken down military base, and have various NPCs work for you in that process, which sounds really cool to me. I would love to see that feature even in just a normal Fallout game. And then they just describe how you could have great adventures and discover ancient technologies, as well as fight back against some of the enemies that do inhabit this world. All around, seems like it would have been pretty interesting. Through some of the concept art, we see things like power armor and other things that are really well known in the Fallout franchise, but of course, this is before Fallout 3, where Bethesda established a lot of new things that weren't present in some of the earlier Fallout games, and all around just the tone was changed. A video I actually plan to make in the future is how Bethesda kind of transformed Vault-Tec. In the initial games, Vault-Tec wasn't this evil corporation as it is in Fallout 3, 4, and New Vegas. So that's pretty much going to wrap it up for this video, but actually before we close it out and before our psych fun fact of the day, there actually is a Fallout MMO of sorts. It's called Fallout Online Reloaded. It's not actually made by a game company, but it more or less takes some of those original Fallouts, I believe Fallout and Fallout 2, and allows you to play them online with others. So this is going to be very different than the Fallout Online we were just talking about, because this one is going to be that top-down RPG style of the original Fallouts. And of course, that experience is quite distinctive from anything like Fallout 3 or the proposed Fallout Online. Either way, this is going to pretty much be one of the only options you have as far as multiplayer in the Fallout universe. Obviously, there's some Fallout New Vegas multiplayer mods, but they're not really on the same level of polish that this one is. This again is totally free, so if you guys do enjoy it, you can donate to them also, because they are paying out of their pocket to maintain these servers, and if people don't donate, it'll probably just shut down one day. Either way, I just wanted to give that a shout out, so if you are interested in checking out a game that is at least somewhat close to the Fallout Online, this is an option. But before we end things off, again, we do have our psych fun fact of the day. Today I'm actually going to talk a little bit about like trauma and more or less distinctive experiences that people go through. So interestingly enough, there's actually been research into this, and it was found that trauma or depression or anxiety or PTSD, things like that, actually form neural pathways in your brain. So let's say you are depressed for a while or experiencing PTSD over something for many years or maybe even many months. The biology and chemistry of your brain is actually being modified during this, and these neural pathways are created. The effect of this more or less being that even if you overcome this and actually get over your depression, or you manage to cope with your PTSD largely, those neural pathways are still going to exist there, so it's very easy to fall back into whatever that trauma was previously. It's going to make it much easier to feel that negative emotion, whatever it may be, even if you haven't felt it in a very long time, just from a simple trigger. That's why a lot of the time when you actually treat things like this, it's much more around the coping thing, and actually just taking a pill isn't always a great solution, because as soon as you stop taking that pill, you may easily and instantaneously just fall back into how you were feeling previously. And actually, just one other side note, I actually got my E3 badge, I think yesterday, so I am registered to go to E3 as media, and I am going to be going. I will be doing a live stream on Bethesda's conference, but E3 is only like 6 weeks away now, which is pretty wild. I will be covering whatever Bethesda shows off there, but in addition, I actually want to cover hopefully CD Projekt Red's new game, Cyberpunk 2077, which we should get some news on there. I want to take a look at and hopefully get to play Metro Exodus also. I think that should be a pretty interesting game also, although slightly different than the other two. And then finally, hopefully we'll get some news on Obsidian's new game, and I'm not really sure if that's going to be at E3, but if it is, I definitely will be making videos on that also. Not really a huge deal if you're subscribed to this channel, which hopefully you are. You will just see these videos pop up, but I figure I'd give you guys a quick disclaimer on it either way. But as always, again, I thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope to see you all next time. Later.